we have been asked to cover this story on this particular pod for our listeners.
We were just living in love and just living our best lives. It was a dream come true, you know, let's face it, it's every girl's sort of fairy tale, isn't it? We went for the second scan and I remember it vividly. It's something we don't talk about. And you know, the next words out of the nurse's mouth was, "Oh, it's Easter now though. If I can have my time again, I probably would have done things a lot differently." Instantly, it felt as though it gets frowned upon that you're too, you know, your age. I just remember being in utter despair. Whatever's coming next, you know, it's not going to be a pleasant experience.
Sorry to just put my 2 pence in.
Just get out of this environment as quickly as you can. When your pain gets too much, phone this number.
Not actually what bloody happened.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's probably not the right word to use. Yeah.
I remember the nurse saying to me, I think that's how I passed my first miscarriage.
Oh, wow.
It did, and then it's just downhill from there, right? And look, there's no good news story here, is there? Let's be honest. The shit show, if I can call it that, just continues. So I'm assuming I was just on my last legs by that point. Should I be more emotionally attached to it? Shouldn't I?
You and Robbo decided, was it within a year that you wanted to go down the IVF route? Is that right?
I wish I was a bit more forceful in the work environment. I'm sat here now leading a very sort of fulfilled life. Being able to help others with my story is important to me.
Hello and welcome to Becoming Lucy with me, Hannah.
And me, Lucy. So today's episode is about something that many people go through, but far fewer people talk about openly. We're talking about miscarriage, IVF, and the quiet grief that can come when becoming a parent doesn't happen the way we imagined.
Yeah, for so many women and couples, the journey to parenthood is not straightforward. There are appointments, hormones, hope, disappointment, and sometimes a slow realisation that the life you pictured may look different.
And our guest today is Claire. She met her husband, Robbo, later in life, fell in love, travelled the world, and built a successful career. And like many couples, assumed that starting a family would simply happen when the time was right.
Yeah, but Claire's story took a different path. A miscarriage at 14 weeks, 2 rounds of IVF, and the process of learning to live and thrive in a life without children.
And this conversation is about honesty. It's about the realities of miscarriage, the emotional and physical toll of IVF, and the courage it takes to rewrite the narrative of your life.
Yes. So, Claire, we are so excited to have you on Becoming Lucy, and we're super grateful that you're wanting to share your story with us. And what we kind of normally do is we know some of our guests, we don't know some of our guests, and you are in the camp of we don't know you and you've reached out, and we're super thank you for that. So, yeah, thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure. And like I say, today is a little bit different because we had quite a lot of requests from our listeners to cover, obviously, the subject of IVF. And me and Hannah knew we had to handle this with a lot of care, like we do. Well, hopefully we do with all our guests. But we were like, how do we approach women and ask them to share their story? And this is how we obviously came to meet Claire. So we got in touch for the Wild and Wild empowerment chat, didn't we? Basically. Yeah. Which is, based in Cheshire. Obviously, I don't know if it's global, everything on Instagram, but I kind of put a post out and Claire kindly messaged me back, and this is how we're here today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got connected through the phenomenal April, didn't we, in the Wild and Well community. And I think it was around the time that the Chinese New Year had just broken. It was the year of the horse. So I'm going to say yes to everything. Well, not quite everything. But you get me drift, right? Saying yes to all the good, wholesome stuff. Yeah. So yeah, again, thank you to April yet again for bringing a great bunch of women together who introduced me indirectly to you guys. So yeah, great to be here.
Oh, no,
No.
thanks, April. We're very grateful for that as well. And I know that she does a lot of great work. So we're really happy that you were connected to us via that. So, yeah, welcome again.
Yeah. Yeah, welcome again. And like I say, before we delve a little bit more into your story, Claire, today, obviously we want to meet you first. So who was Claire before the chapter in her life, before the hospitals, before the IVF clinics? What did life look like?
Yeah, and that ultimately leads into the chapter of, miscarriage and IVF, because I was born not far from here, so a northern working class family. I from a beautiful home but a broken home, got a gorgeous sister, and I just was sort of brought up on work hard, get out there, nothing comes for free. So sort of northern true working class grit. Unfortunately, that, with that sort of mentality, have a really successful career. And I found myself in a career which was predominantly a male environment. So I was, in my 20s and certainly early 30s, which was 20 odd years ago now, didn't really talk about pregnancy or thought about having a family. So I think that, combined with the fact, I just hadn't met the right guy neither. That's important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and my work took me over to Asia. Singapore was my home for a while. Australia was my home for a while. And whilst I did have relationships during that time, it never even crossed my mind. And I am absolutely one of them girls who think I left school like 5 years ago. And it's not, it's like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of me being young at heart, being in a male-dominated work environment, and then actually just not meeting the love of my life until sort of mid-30s. So that was me leading up to this journey of miscarriage and IVF.
And I think you're right in saying all that combination is quite normal, or it's normalized now in terms of people having children later on in life, and that's exactly how it should be, because all the stuff that you've just described, the traveling, the working, the having fun, absolutely you should be able to do that without thinking about a biological clock, right? And then obviously throwing in meeting your husband in your mid-30s, which was 2016, right? And he's called Robbo.
Yes, that's right. I say
Lovely.
2016. It's probably about then. Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about you and Robbo then.
Well, yeah. So I came back from being an expat and home from. I'm sat in Alsager now, but this area I grew up in Stoke. I went to high school in Bucknell. So this sort of neck of the woods has always been my home. And I came back from Australia single, and I always had this vision of meeting a local guy, and I did. I went to I was a +1 for a friend down at a wedding in Cornwall, down in Lusty Glade. Yeah, so I met my husband drunk at a friend's wedding on a beach in Cornwall. And then I think combined with the fact that I'd just been an expat for 10 years and then fell in love with Robert, we were just like having a good time, like having the time of our lives. And because, we're a little bit older, a little bit more disposable income, not much, that's for sure, but everything else was just falling into place beautifully. And I was, we didn't talk about kids or like, I just feel for anyone, like, when you watch like Love Island now and you're like, should we be exclusive? Like, there wasn't any of this chat around, should we start a family? I can't even remember that conversation, like going from dating to being in a relationship to.
There was no fire pit then. No, there was no conversations.
It wasn't like, you've got a text. Nothing like that. It was just all happened like really beautiful, like a really lovely, beautiful love story from this beach in Cornwall. And actually, the miscarriage was probably the first hurdle of our relationship, to be honest. But sorry, going back to the point, it wasn't a conversation we had for years about starting a family, because we were just living in love, and just living our best lives.
Yeah, and that's like such an amazing thing to do, and it shouldn't be then kind of stopped because you hit 40, which is kind of what happened, wasn't it? You kind of, before you knew it, you were 40, and you wanted to then try for a family. Is that right?
Yeah, so we must, as I say, I can't really remember having that conversation, but we must have done. We must have tried something anyway. So yeah, I'd been on contraception for, I guess, getting on for 20 years at that point. So, we didn't overplan it. I wasn't particularly keeping an eye on my cycle or anything like that. So again, very naturally, fell pregnant, which was felt like an absolute blessing. And just started then the process of phoning the doctors and getting appointments. And then because we weren't particularly regimented with dates and all this sort of stuff, we wasn't too sure how far gone we were or weren't. So after our first scan, we then got told to come back for our second scan because it seemed like a little bit too soon for a scan first time round. So this is how, just really natural and authentic this whole process was up until
Yeah.
the unfortunate miscarriage.
And when you found out you were pregnant, then, even though you were kind of, the dates weren't what you thought, or you didn't really keep an eye on that, which I think is actually quite nice, that it was just really relaxed and laid back. What were you and Robbo feeling and thinking then when the news came out that you did fall pregnant? How were you feeling at that time?
Oh, it was a dream come true. Let's face it, it's every girl's sort of fairy tale, isn't it? After meeting my husband on the beach in Cornwall, so sort of having our family home together. And we actually were in a home together then, within of the intention of it being our family home, and so it was just the good times just kept rolling, really, and it was a really fond period. And I wasn't sick or anything like that. So I just remember, sharing the news with my family. They were delighted. Just really, really like joyful time. It was beautiful.
Oh. And can you tell us then what happened at that second
Yeah.
scan?
Yeah, so we went for the second scan, and I remember it vividly because we were going on holiday the following day. So again, just riding this good news story, we were like, oh, we'll go for a scan, and then the following day we're jumping on a plane, and it didn't cross my mind for one moment that something could be wrong. And I think that's in part of what you've alluded to, Lucy, at the start. It's something we don't talk about. I didn't have many friends or any. It just wasn't a thing in my life. Like now, I could talk to you till the cows come home about the hormones, and I chat to my friends about the hormones, and not a day goes past without having some conversation about the hormones. But talking miscarriage, it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't on my mind. I didn't think it had happened to me. So yeah, went for the scan, and looking back now, it was quite obvious that something was wrong, because the lady who was the nurse that was taking the scan of my belly, she alluded to the nurse in the background going, "Oh, just turn the screens off." Whereas I guess if you're a parent and that was your second time round, you probably know instantly. But again, we were probably quite oblivious. And the nurse just went on to explain that the fetus just wasn't compatible with life. And at that moment in time, I was still carrying the baby, it was still, fetus was still alive and functioning. But it was them terms, it was the terms that it's not compatible with life. Um, but then, I look back now and I'm like, gee whiz. And the next words out of the nurse's mouth was, "Oh, it's Easter now though, and we're not going to be able to get you an appointment for a while."
Wow.
So I just went, "Okay." And again, if I can have my time again, I probably would have done things a lot differently. But you,
And that appointment I'm
Yeah.
taking to terminate the baby because obviously it's not compatible with life, and that was, they were telling you that you'd have to wait to do that after hearing this horrific news.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
also, why wasn't the baby compatible with life? Did they explain to you why? Or
There was a chromosome issue, so it was. They describe it if it's not compatible with life, and I think even in that early, if my memory serves me correctly, and it's interesting right now because I think to sort of safeguard myself, I think mentally my memory might be a little bit different to reality because I think that was my body's sort of safeguarding of
Yeah.
what was going on, if you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
I this is why I'm saying I think even early on, even in that, maybe in that first conversation, there was a referral to your age. It's a
Really.
chromosome issue. And this is what infuriates me a little bit because I'm like, that was the age where the first time in my life I was in a loving, caring relationship. To be, to be able to have um a, you know, a family, and then instantly it felt as though it gets frowned upon that you're too, your age.
Yeah,
It,
and like you've just said, you felt ready to bring a child into a loving environment. What, as opposed to someone who's 15 years younger in maybe a volatile relationship that's bringing children into the world. And obviously, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just in this situation, the comparison, I can imagine, like you said, you were probably just confused and shocked that they would bring that to your attention after giving you this devastating news, and then basically saying, it's probably your age. And I understand from a medical point of view that they have to obviously figure out what has caused it. But so many women now, later in their life, having babies, and there are so many success stories of women in later life having babies. So again, maybe it's talked about more, maybe, the research is increasing, etc., etc. But you'd still think they would maybe talk to you about that, maybe at a different stage, rather
yes.
than just there, because you're probably then harboring this feeling of, well, pure emotion that it's your fault, when absolutely it isn't your fault at all.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. And then, from what you've just alluded to, Hannah, it's just sort of, and I'm with you in what you said. I've got a huge amount of respect for the doctors and nurses in the NHS and everything that phenomenal organisation does. Unfortunately, though, at that point for me, it did become a bit transactional, as you've alluded to, Lucy. It was like, yeah, you can't get an appointment now for a week because it's the Easter holidays and it's
Yeah.
I
bank
can't
holidays,
believe that.
and you
Like,
just
you're
Yeah.
you
expected to
just come back.
carry a child and all that things,
Yeah.
like everything that's going through your head and the grief at the same time. But just that bond is obviously still there. Like we talked about hormones and everything like
Hmm.
that. Like what's going on in your mind and then what your body's doing at the same time. I mean, do you remember that? I mean, what were you going through? Do you know what I
I think it
mean?
was just complete despair, if I'm honest, and this is what I mean around. I think I genuinely believe because I don't sit here going, I've got like really vivid memories of them sort of 5-6 days. I think your body does a nice job of just shutting some
Yeah.
stuff off. I do
Protective, isn't
really
it?
believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember being in utter despair. I remember coming out the hospital, just breaking down. And then just, having to wait for this next appointment. And if the truth be known, I didn't really know what was coming next.
Yeah. Did anyone speak to you then? Sit you down, like anything? Like...
No, but then, we'll get onto it. But it's a pretty lonely experience from there on, if the truth be known.
So did you just go home with Robbo and
Yep.
just live in a blur, I take it, until you got the phone call?
Yeah. So you go, and this is the sad bit. And again, I wish I'd, if anyone's listening to this podcast, my advice would be to speak up, because then you get an appointment to go back into the maternity unit. So you're literally sat there. I mean, I do remember this, on the bloody plastic chairs in the maternity unit, and you've got, and don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from these beautiful women that are around me who are pregnant, and there's kids running around. And at that point, you're just going into an appointment from hell. Whatever's coming next, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And yeah, unfortunately, you are sat there on the maternity unit waiting for your appointment, which isn't, there's nothing ideal about that. I don't think we'd meet any man or woman who says that's ideal. Even just going to like A&E or so, like any ward would be better than that, right?
And we've had conversations around this on different episodes, and we've, various conversations about baby loss and this, that, and the other, and just, sometimes people's experiences at hospitals. We've talked about cancer and things like that. And I do think that what you said is a valid bit of feedback. Why can't women who are going through trauma to do with fertility or losing babies or, miscarriages, anything that goes with the unfortunate situation that you and so many women face, why isn't there a separate ward? Why isn't there a separate place where these procedures can take place, where you're not forced to sit, like you said, in the middle of what your life should be in 7 months, 6 months?
Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of...
It's got to be a budgeting reason, hasn't it? Because basically they're putting you on that ward because they're the staff who know how to deal with it. But there isn't obviously another ward that they can probably afford to make this separate ward for that's the only thing I can think of, just to, you know what I mean, from a logical side, because those doctors and nurses obviously deal with the maternity side, but there obviously isn't enough funding, as we know with the NHS, to make a completely different ward. But obviously when it comes to the mental health side of things, and you're suffering and you're going through all these emotions, it's obviously not ideal. But that's the only thing, sorry to just put my 2 pence in, that's like logically to put together.
I think,
do you know
I think
what I mean?
you're right. And I think also none of these nurses and doctors want to see anyone suffer as well.
No.
They don't, they're not, going, stick them in the middle of here and just see how they can, take it. They're not thinking that. They're just doing an incredible job day in, day out. But even if you had that kind of counselling element of it placed in these wards for anyone like yourself that kind of is shown there, told to sit, wait, have the procedure, even if you had that option to say there's a counsellor right here, right now, if you want to have a talk, that from a budgeting point of view or a financial point of view, yes, it's still going to stretch it, but it does seem mad. And I know we're going to talk about your IVF journey later, but I know quite a few people, some very, close people as well, who are going through this, and they've told me stories about being in situations like yourself and sitting in the middle and hearing people degrade their own pregnancy because it's their 4th child, and maybe they're not in the loving place that you and Robbo were going to be about bringing this child in. hearing people going outside of wards, having cigarettes while they're getting a scan at,
Yeah.
28 weeks, all these things as well that hospitals can't control, the clientele, I suppose, that come in. And even that judgment that people are having when they hear that person say that, or they hear a conversation that you think, oh my God, and I'm here suffering and you're bringing a baby into the world. Obviously, we can't judge with how that child gets brought up. You'd like to think everything is hunky-dory and, it's just one of those situations. But even that, to hear and witness that when you're about to go through the most traumatic situation in your life, it just feels like there's got to be some kind of conversation around, is there anything we can do to remove women and couples from those situations when they're about to lose a baby?
Yeah, 100%. And like, as I say, even if it's like, I prefer to have gone in the back entrance. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll go in the staff entrance, not to have sat next to them beautiful pregnant women. Like, I do hear what we're saying about budget and that sort of stuff. To me, and I know this is controversial, but common sense prevails at that point, somewhere along the lines of just not being in that environment. And as I say, I think it would have been a better solution to go and sit in any A&E, wait for your appointment, rather than amongst other pregnant women, like anywhere apart from there.
And then call you through afterwards and have a different route or something like that, or just make it quicker so you're not sat with them. I 100% agree. And then you had to make the decision whether to have a procedure, which I presume is like obviously an operation, which, well, I can vouch, I did have one of them myself, or have the pill. So what did they say to you? Did they talk you through, like, this is the best option, this is the risk? Like, what information did they give you so you made that decision?
Yeah, so I as I say, I waited then for about this week for this appointment. And I do vividly remember being in that maternity area and just wanting desperately to get out as soon as I could. So whatever was about to come next, my mental state was just get out of that, like, just get out of this environment as quickly as you can. When you can just feel, sweaty palms, like irritable. So maybe, that first step of sitting, in that maternity area, maybe for me that was the initial downfall, because going into that, obviously you then go into a little private room. For me, the damage was done at that point. Like, I could not wait to leave that appointment. I had miscarried. So when I went back for the second scan, I had miscarried.
Right.
So it still, that choice that you've alluded to though, Lucy, to be put into a general anaesthetic or to be given the pill. And the advice was to take the pill because of the risk of the anaesthetic. And I guess we hear that a lot as well, don't we, around for your body, the best thing to do would be to pass naturally. So
that's very traumatic though, which I'm sure we're going to go into, because do you know what I mean? Cause
but I felt as though it was all very transactional at this stage for me. But as I say, I've got my part to play because I just couldn't wait to get out. So it felt to me as though, look, it might have been 10 minutes. It felt to me as though it was minutes from me saying, I'll have the pill, to having the pill in front of me in that little bloody daft plastic tub, to taking the pill. And that was it. There was no come back in a couple of hours, have a think about it. And because of, physically and mentally, my body was saying to me, just get out of there, because of that initial experience of being in that environment.
See, that's an idea. They could have just even, I know this is probably something else, but it would only take one staff member. And again, I don't know how many staff they have. I know they're short, but have a conversation like this over Zoom, over the internet, explain those procedures. You don't have to even be in the hospital. This is your choices. Have a think about it, and we'll see you
Yeah.
XYZ in the hospital in so many days. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. So you can reflect and you can really understand what you're going to put your body and your mind through, because physically you're going to get over that way quicker than you are emotionally. And I don't think you'll ever, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you'll ever get over the emotional trauma that caused you. And you can feel it, you can hear it in how you're speaking to us right now. So like you said, the damage is already done. You're just fight or flight mode. You're like, get
Yeah.
me out of here. You're then also just feeling like probably not pressured in a negative way, but just because your body wants to get out of there, you're pressuring yourself, but also not having everything laid out. And the conversations are very quite quick because they've got to move on to the next person, like you said, transactional. So do you regret doing the pill as opposed to the procedure then, now you've had time to reflect?
I do, because of then what comes next.
Mm.
So I take the pill. That's the term I was after, fight or flight. I was in I was in flight mode.
Yeah.
And the lady says still very transactional. The nurse says to me, when your pain gets too much, phone this number and you'll come back. Now I do sound a bit daft saying this. I didn't think for 1 minute, because I've miscarried, right? So
Yeah. Just talk us through that, just so I can get an understanding, and feel free to say you don't want to answer it, because, I mean, I'll hand on heart say I've had a miscarriage, and when I knew I was having a miscarriage, it was because of the pain and it was because of the blood. So how was that initial miscarriage different to that, if that makes sense? Is that...
I didn't know. Yeah,
No, they
so I
never
didn't
explained
know.
it.
It's only when I went back to the hospital. So I had my second scan, and it was not compatible with life. Going into the Easter break, come back in a week. Came back, had my appointment, waited in the maternity area. Quick scan.
Yeah.
You and you see, even that, I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 years. I
Yeah, it's
still
that
get
long.
stuck for words as to how to allude to this process. I still struggle a little bit to call it a baby. So I think I've already alluded to it as a fetus. So the fetus had already passed.
Right.
So, and I can't recall that happening physically. I can't remember a point in time. Oh yeah, that
happened
was
in that
there.
gap between the scans, and obviously
Yeah.
you'd been informed, but you still needed the medical procedure, either
Right.
pill or the op.
So that makes
to
sense.
get-
It's like
yeah.
it's like heart could have stopped or something like that kind of thing,
Yes.
and it was still right. Sorry if I have to go
Sorry,
in too much.
ladies.
It's just no, not you. I think a lot of our listeners might be asking the same thing, or they might refer on like, oh, how do I know? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And all these things if it was to
Yeah.
happen to them. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up if we're going into
Yeah,
it.
and as I say, for me, I didn't know when it had happened. So took the pill. And yeah, as I say, the instructions were to go home when the pain gets too much, phone this number. And I was at home for 18, 20 hours. And this is a bit that probably sounds daft, where some of your listeners will be going, surely, you're a woman in your 40s, you've got a bit going for you, you've got this successful career. What, you really didn't know there were like contractions? But that's exactly what was happening to me. But I didn't know. It was just the pain coming on and going and coming on and going. And I didn't associate it as contractions because I haven't got a baby. It's just this thing I need to pass now, isn't it?
I would say, Claire, like, please don't invalidate yourself, because absolutely no one is thinking that. Even if you were carrying a baby to full term, and I haven't, even at that point, when contractions start, you're still a little bit like, is it not? When you're a first time person being pregnant or whatever, you don't know. So for
No,
you
I have no
to have
idea.
been told that the fetus had passed, you've been given a pill to, essentially completely make sure from a medical point of view the fetus is out of you. Of course you are not going to know that is contractions. Like, so I just didn't want you to think that it should be all on you, because
No.
your mind must have been in bits at this point. Like you said, the pain is excruciating. You know, you find out in the end, and we'll go on to this, that it was contractions, and obviously now you'll explain the rest of it. But I just didn't want you to
Oh,
go with that, because I
Yeah.
honestly, no one is thinking that. Like, you know, I'm in awe with what you've coped with already. And I just would hate for you to think that people are
thank
thinking
you,
that
Anna.
about you, because they're not
Mm.
at all.
And to back
Fabulous.
that, I think this is the reason we're doing an episode like this, because people don't openly talk about it. Yes, they'll talk about the, you know, the medical terms, miscarriage,
Yeah.
fetus, this happens, not actually what bloody happens.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's probably not the right word to use. Yeah, but that is why, because we don't
Well,
talk
yeah.
about it openly enough,
Yeah.
unless you got a close friend or whatever, and you sat and you probably had a glass of wine and it all comes out. You never even knew
Yeah.
one had the miscarriage. It's like, oh my God, I had that experience. But because no one's actually sat and said,
Yeah.
you have contractions and pain, this, and how much.
Yeah.
Right, we'll go into it. Do you know what I mean? But this is why. So,
Yeah, as I
Yeah.
say, it's like what we were going back to earlier at the beginning. Like, it just wasn't a thing. Like, if I'd met you like 8 years ago, Lucy, you know, I might have learned a bit more going into this. But
Yeah.
I didn't have this. I didn't have the knowledge. Like, it was a complete void of.
Yeah. And that is exactly that. And I think, like, this is why for us, even if this touches or reaches one person who could be in the throes of about to have a miscarriage, or, you know, even if they've had ones before, you know, sitting there being like, I know exactly how she's feeling, because that's what I went through. And now actually I had those emotional feelings about, how didn't I not know? And no, I shouldn't feel that way. And talking of like advocating for miscarriages and the emotional and physical trauma it has on people, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago that Mylene Class got knighted for the work that she's done on bringing miscarriage to the forefront of people's minds, so that there are more conversations about it, so that it's, because it's so common.
1 in 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just had to Google it then, because I knew it was 1 in 4, because I heard it the other day. I was listening to a podcast with
1 in 4.
Jamelia. 1 in 4. Yeah.
Like 1 in 4
Crazy.
women are having to go through this physical and emotional trauma. And people have multiple miscarriages as well,
Yeah.
right? You know, and you can probably absolutely confirm that one is bad enough, let alone
Yeah.
you know, the women that go through multiple. So, you know, these conversations, and like we said earlier, we have been asked to cover this story on this particular pod for our listeners, which we're very grateful for, because it allows us to have these conversations and for us to be educated, you know, and to us to understand it more and ask those sort of questions, like I said, not to make you feel uncomfortable, but just to try and connect some dots.
Oh yeah, and as you've alluded to already, if this conversation helps one person, then our job here is done, right? Because I absolutely wish I had this like 8 years ago, like, you know, not even 8 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as I say, well, I appreciate the feedback, Hannah. I really appreciate it, because I did think, oh my God, you do think I should have known, but then you're right. How should I have known? But so yeah, I was having contractions at home, and then my waters broke at home.
Oh my God.
But they didn't explain, like, if they'd said to me, if the hospital at that point had said, you're going to take this pill and the pain is going to be contractions.
Yeah.
And your waters are probably going to break. Because how much is like too much pain as well? Whereas
everyone's got different thresholds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some people's waters don't break.
Yeah.
Some people have, I mean, I don't know that part, but
literally half at home, half in the bloody birthing pool. Everyone is so different, and same for miscarriages. Like, that information should have absolutely been laid out to you. And I think that goes back to the resourcing issue we were saying. There's not a doctor or nurse on this earth that wants you to go home and be in this emotional trauma, but it's the time that they've got to sit and spend to discuss this could happen, that could happen, that could happen. And there's probably that many caveats that they probably can't do that in case it doesn't happen. And then you don't come in or you don't.
Yeah, there'd be so many policies and protocols, like because we put this in and you know what I mean, that hasn't happened, they put fear and there'll be so much behind it.
Yeah.
You can obviously tell we're all very passionate because we're all like,
So the 3 hours long.
Oh, right. So we'll go back. So your water's broke.
So
and then what happened?
water's break.
Wow.
I'm now like, this is 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Water's break. Robbo drives me to the hospital. Now, fortunately, I'm only 10 minutes from the hospital, but I was discharging a lot of blood now at this point. And that 10 minutes felt like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Gets to the entrance, because you have to go back to the maternity ward. Gets to the entrance of the maternity ward closed, locked. It's a big city hospital, North Stacks.
Yeah.
And you have to press a buzzer and all this sort of stuff. I'm now 10 minutes deep into passing.
Wow.
All sorts of stuff.
And again, did they give you anything? This is me. Sorry, tangent. Like...
So the doors finally open, and there was this is the horrific part of all this story. The doors open. There's a toilet there on your left hand side. I rushed to the toilet, but I'm not sure if I'm on all fours, but I'm literally like holding on to the walls because I think I've just passed that much stuff. I've been in pain for so long. Gets to the toilet, and then a big gush of discharge comes again. And the nurse comes into me on the toilet and says, "Oh, don't flush the toilet." Didn't think anything of it. Goes back, gets upstairs. They get a trolley and they get me on a ward. In the position of giving birth, and there was sort of like lots of whispers but again, I guess the truth be known, I don't really know what it should look and feel like. But it became apparent that I'd passed the fetus on the toilet. Well, I'm assuming on the toilet downstairs as I was entering the building. And that's so that the placenta still had to come out. But that whole experience. Can you see it's like a build-up of me having that initial appointment in the maternity area, going into fight and flight mode, wanting to get out there as quickly as I could. So me on a personal level, probably not asking the amount of questions I wanted to ask, because I was in this fight or flight. A real quick transactional decision around taking the pill, took the pill, come back when your pain's too much. Well, what's too much? And then just being physically in a right pickle on a toilet in an NHS hospital. And then I'm 99.9% sure that's where the fetus passed.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I've never actually looked back on it, but I think exactly the same happened to me, but it was a toilet at home. Do you know what I mean? And then that's when I was quite young at the time. My mum came in and I was throwing up and everything at the same time, and it gets me to hospital. And then I had to have the procedure after that because obviously you'll go into more detail. But Claire, I think there's probably a lot of women like us who have probably had that. So you're not on your own on that side. Yeah.
And I remember the nurse saying to exactly that, Lucy, what you just alluded to. I remember the nurse saying to me, I think that's how I passed my first miscarriage.
Oh, wow.
So I do think it's like, and actually, I take sort of what's the word I'm after? I take some sort of, it helps me.
Yeah, some solace. Is it solace?
Yeah.
You that by NHS nurse, and they said it's so. Well, it sounds like they said it's so like nonchalant to try and support you and try and reassure you, and you're like, okay, I will take some support from that. But in the same breath, it's like that shouldn't be said like that. Why is it that miscarriages are just like, yeah, miscarriage? Like, and, from what we are talking about and from what is being described, it is not just, miscarriage. Like, it is physical and emotional trauma. And let alone being pregnant in your case and looking forward to bringing the baby into the world, let alone that's the initial thought. And then all of a sudden, like, you've kind of just took us through it really quickly to be in this position where you are in stirrups, essentially, like you said, in the position where you're about to give birth, but you've passed the fetus in the toilet, which makes sense why the nurse said, don't flush the toilet. Like, it's just, I'm like visually going through it in my head, and I'm just like, wow, this is just crazy. And for it to happen to 1 in every 4 women, and I know everyone's experience is different. Some people, might have had better experiences, if I can use that word. I don't mean to use it like that, not flippant, but you know what I mean? But still, there's a lot of people that would have gone through what you guys have gone through, which is just horrific.
Yeah, and it just doesn't need to be that way. Like, and like, we're sat here tonight and like brainstormed, like, just put me in, like, just in that mode. If I hadn't got in fight or flight mode in that initial appointment, being in that maternity area amongst all pregnant women, I think that was the first mistake. It did, and then it's just downhill from there, right? And look, there's no good news story here, is there? Let's be honest. It doesn't need to be as bad as it is.
Yeah. There could be ways to protect you in that moment. And like you said, you're not looking for the happily ever after. You're just looking for some protection and some support and some knowledge and some education and some information. And it was a knock-on effect from the initial, like you said, being brought into that ward where you're looking around and experiencing things that's not going to happen to you because of the reason why you're there. And what then happened after that? The nurse told you that, tried to reassure you. Did you stay in hospital long? Did you get discharged? And then what were the sort of days after this? What did it look like for you?
Well, I don't think there'll be any surprises here. The shit show, if I can call it that, just continues. So I'm so I think I said to you, like 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, so it's dark. Before sunrise, I'm back out the hospital.
Wow.
So again, there's no like tea or toast. There's no like
Aftercare,
like, nothing. And actually, the only aftercare I did get was a nurse coming in with a memory box. And I wasn't prepared for this, and this bloody memory box haunted me for a year. But there is actually a happily ever after with the memory box, which I'll come on to. So I can remember being confronted with a memory box, just not massive, but like a little memory box. And I wasn't in that space at all. But so in answer to your question, I was out of the hospital within a couple of hours with this memory box. And the memory box actually, I think the memory box actually derailed me a lot mentally and emotionally, because I'm like, what's this? Like, what? I don't know. Like, it just didn't.
Can I ask what they put in the memory box?
So it's like a little teddy bear,
right?
And a little blanket that I think's like some of the women on the ward knitted and this sort of stuff. Yeah. But it wasn't what I don't. For me, again, that might have been perfect for some people, but it wasn't
ask, right?
me. You don't even get asked. It wasn't even, would you like a memory box? I remember this old dear coming in. Like, maybe she's like a retired nurse or something like that. Who does the rounds around the hospital or something like that. I don't know. With this memory box, and I just remember we're really in my space, and here's your memory box, dear. And again, it might have hit the spot for some people. It just didn't hit the spot for me.
I
And it
suppose
wasn't an
it's how
ask.
it's explained, isn't it? Because I presume I've just got this image in my head, and this little old lady, they put a little charity together. They're probably, trying to do nice things for
Yeah.
women who have lost a baby, but it's kind of like that's a very traumatic memory. Like you say, some people could get a memory box and think, I want something to remember
Yeah.
that this baby, is a baby. We refer to fetus
Yeah.
baby, but everyone's got their own opinions. But maybe it's just how, I don't know, it should
How it's
be
presented.
explained,
Yeah.
or presented,
Yeah.
or you
In-
know what I mean? Because technically, there was no memory link to that bear, or that the baby
No.
wasn't in that, the cover, or do you know what I
Exactly.
mean? There was no,
Yeah.
I don't know. Everyone's, but I said they're obviously trying their best in other ways.
Yeah.
It's just how it's presented, isn't
And
it?
I suppose as well, they're like thinking. So, say for example, and I'm interested to know the happy ending for the memory box, because if you flip this perspective and say you are, no, I don't want this, absolutely not, then you now have not got this happy memory that you're going
Yeah.
to tell us
Yeah.
about, because at that time you were like, absolutely not. So I'm not saying they should force it on people, but in your case, it's turned, and now you have got
Yeah.
this memory box. So maybe it is a case of, if we ask everyone, they're just going to say no, when we know from experience or research or our own feelings, and we got given this memory box and now we're part of the charity or whatever, later down the line, you are going to
Yeah.
want this. But still there's
Exactly.
a missing something, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, because at the time, it just was, the timing wasn't right for me in that moment. I just, physically, I'm assuming I was just on my last legs by that point. I'd had a quick shower and I was going out the hospital, and then this woman's in front of you with a memory box. So the timing for me wasn't right. But then you're absolutely right, Anna, because I say it's a happy ever after. It's not that happy, actually. It's quite a sad podcast, this one. So that are we calling it a procedure? The procedure happened
you
on
want
on the 1st of May. And then I had this memory box in the house. It was like up in the top of the wardrobe, but it'd be frequently on my mind, because was it should I be doing something more with it? Should I be more emotionally attached to it? Shouldn't I? So for a long time, it wasn't doing anything for me, actually, and it was on my mind a lot. Anyway, a year later, and as I say, it's not a particularly happy story. A year later, on the 1st of May, exact same day, my dad passed. So actually, the memory box is now with my dad's ashes. So that's what it's like. That's what I mean. I probably oversold it as a. But that, for me, on a personal level, and you're right what you're saying, Hannah, because it wasn't the right time at the time, but actually a year on, it all of a sudden became the right time, that memory box.
Yeah.
And that I think that's a small point. And I think different things for different people in that sort of emotional state. Feel strongly around the build up of what got me there. I think everybody would agree. But you're right, that memory box could have hit the nail on the head for 9 out of 10 women, and I was just the 10th woman that didn't want it in that moment. But a year later, it was perfect.
Oh, so that's so lovely. And you didn't oversell it at all, at all. That is kind of closed that chapter. Would you say,
Yeah.
that year later, your dad's ashes are in there. What a nice way to kind of connect the two, and that traumatic chapter that you've just been beautifully explaining to us has now closed. Ready for the new one to open, which is IVF.
Yes.
And you and Robbo decided, was it within a year that you wanted to go down the IVF route? Is that right?
Yeah. And I remember, some of my friends saying to me, oh, you might fall pregnant really quickly again, because this sometimes happens. But it felt as though it was about a year. I guess the bit we've missed is, so I comes out of hospital because because they could rescue the placenta. They did a biopsy of the placenta, and then I got a letter through the post explaining and confirming from the biopsy of the placenta that it was a chromosome issue.
Right.
And they give me some odds of it, it happening again. So I wasn't, whilst of course we got this age thing on my mind around how old I am, in the outcome, in theory, I could have fell pregnant again. But it wasn't happening. Time was skipping away. And because of my age, I couldn't get IVF support through the NHS.
Wow.
Because I'm too old. And I think that's different.
After everything you've been through, and then you finally try and decide again, then you kick in the teeth again that you can't even have the support from from the NHS.
And you're right, what you said about earlier. It's when, 15 years earlier, if I was, I could have had IVF support if I was like in my 30s, but because now I'm in my 40s and the NHS won't support that. Anyway, we committed to 2 rounds of IVF. And it was a private care up in a clinic in Manchester, and Carl obviously does his sperm test, and his sperm's fine. Like, I think he was like 100% fine, and and he was a male doctor, and even then I felt as though that was a bit like, lads talking to lads.
Yeah. It's not you, don't worry about it. It's that sort of thing. Yeah.
And yet, it became apparent from the language, and I think that's where I heard geriatric for the first time, about my age. And now I think we're classed as a geriatric in a certain age bracket as women, aren't we, in this space?
It's 35 onwards, I think.
I was about to say, I think, because a lot of my friends, I know, Hannah, you had Phoebe at 35, didn't you? And they all got referred to as geriatric. Well, I can't even say the word, but
I feel like recently, though, or it might have been a couple of years ago, that has moved, that the age bracket has moved to later 30s. But regardless, no one wants to be called that word because it's not a nice word. Like, it is being used as a detrimental term against women for years. And, it is not a nice word to be used, and we shouldn't have to. I get that biology and scientifically and from a medical point of view, it is a higher risk to have a baby at a later age. I was entering this myself at that point. I always knew I wanted a baby in my mid-30s.
35, sorry.
35, so it still is 35, brilliant. Yeah. Maybe I just told myself that. But like that, it's so horrible that pressure is on us to obviously hit that milestone when you should, like we've said before, be in a loving relationship ready to bring a child into the world and not just have a baby because you hit a 29-year-old bracket from an age perspective. And I get that there needs to be that knowledge and that education around it, because obviously there are things that can happen with those pregnancies, but there are also things that can happen to pregnancies when you're in your early 20s that are exactly the same as what happens in your late 40s or whatever.
Yeah.
It's how your body responds to pregnancy, and there's lots of different things. I'm not taking away that age isn't a factor. I'm not at all. But to be coined that word, and obviously, I feel it because I was of that geriatric age myself. So I just feel that I need to discard that word and just choose a different one.
And I think at that stage as well, I felt as though like the universe was against me a little bit. Up until that, going back to my roots of, work hard, get out there, build a successful career for yourself. Don't, find a man who, is adorable and loves me. And I felt as though I'd been doing all the right things, and then the universe at that point just started to conspire against me. I'm like, come on, what? This can't be right. Up until that, do you know what I mean? It was like, really?
Yeah.
It just didn't feel right. Anyway, went through a couple of rounds of IVF. And
sorry to interject, just in case people and listeners don't have any clue about IVF. I know there's different versions of it, but in your case, could you just give us like a little explanation of what that means when you said went through IVF?
Yeah. So Carl's sperm was fine.
Not
So
good.
that, he didn't need to do anything, or I'd be so pleased I got that in as well, won't he?
High fiving himself.
I'm now just, am I right in saying that Robbo is obviously a nickname? Because you said
Oh,
Robbo.
yeah, sorry, I haven't got too many in my life.
Kind of, yeah.
I didn't even twig.
You said it and I was like, I think Robbo must be a nickname then, but I'm just going to ask just in case.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so we should clarify that. That's happened to me a couple of times, where I'm like, people, have you met someone else, or is he the same guy? No, it's the same guy. Yeah.
Carl / Robbo sperm, all good. He'll be glad. Excellent.
And I was the problem, obviously. So I was going through daily injections at a point in time in my cycle to generate more eggs, better quality eggs. And I was having to inject myself, which I couldn't do. Even now I couldn't do it. But to have an injection daily at home during a particular point in my cycle, I think it's like 14 consecutive days leading into, and then go into hospital, and all this was during COVID, unfortunately. So I suspect my IVF experience was different to that of non-COVID IVF experiences. So, for example, my egg retrieval days, I had to go into the clinic on my own, and it was just it's quite a painful procedure. Again, legs akimbo, for egg retrieval, and then the science and the lab does its thing with Carl's sperm on the hope that at the end of that there's a successful story. And unfortunately for us, there wasn't, and we'd committed to 2 rounds, and we spoke about that logically, very logically actually, up front around financially and all, giving it 2 rounds, but also time wise as well, and we both sort of felt right to giving it 2 rounds. And because again, I hear some stories now, girls are going at, or couples are going at it for years and years and years. And yeah, so and that didn't work out. I do have a few regrets. My biggest, look, I try not, I don't live by regrets, but if I had my time again, and again, if anyone's listening, I wish I was a bit more forceful in the work environment.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because I remember you mentioned.
So I didn't
about that. Yeah,
I didn't really. Look, I worked for an amazing organisation, and I just think because the advice from the clinic is, sort of, it's not like black and white. It's like, look after yourself. You can still function. You don't have to have like your legs akimbo for on your egg days and all this sort of like, just crack on with life. But I think the truth be known is you're under quite a lot of stress during that phase anyway. And I think I wish I'd taken some time off or slowed down. And I was working locally at the time, and I was sort of like nipping home in me breakfast time to come and get me injection off Robbo because I couldn't inject myself. So, just that added bits of pressure that I don't think anybody needs during that phase. So
and what would you say to yourself now, or like another lady who thinks, again, I've got to juggle work, and they might not be in a job, unfortunately, that prioritises. I mean, obviously where I work is fantastic with their health, but do you know what I mean? Some people just get statutory sick pay. Do you know what I mean? Things like that for running home to prioritise themselves. What would be your advice?
I just think you've got to be in a really good headspace. And I was I was sort of, I think as women do, going, oh, it'll be all right. I'll just nip home in my lunch break and it'll be fine, and I don't need to really ask for it. We're not very good at asking for help. I'm not anyway.
No, I agree.
Is just ask for help, because what experience tells me, when you do tend to ask someone somewhere for help, is generally most people get that help in this space anyway, right?
Yeah.
I just wish I'd asked for a bit more help from my employer. It'd be my advice to me if I had my time again.
Yeah. So let your guard down, explain what's going on, and obviously ask, like you said. Do you think that had an impact on the outcome of the IVF cycles?
I honestly don't know. If I don't know if I don't know. I was probably, at 90% from a, stress or rushing around. And if I had my time again, I know what I would do differently, and it would have been that, ask for that support from my employer at the time, which would have got me to like the 100% mark of,
Yeah.
my absolute best for myself and that process. I don't know if it would have or wouldn't have helped.
Yeah. But like you said, you don't want to live by regrets. And regardless of the 90% marker or the 100% marker, you and Robbo did give it your 100%. You spoke about things, you worked
Yeah.
out how it was going to work for you. You picked your clinic, you went and you did everything you could to get through those IVF cycles. And again, I know quite a few people that are in this space, and mentally, again, you've got to protect this in your head. It's more draining and painful mentally, emotionally than it can be physically. Everywhere you look, there's a baby. Everywhere you look, there's a pregnant person. Everywhere you look, there's adverts, TVs, toys, baby food. You're in supermarkets. That must have been excruciating in that time, on top of what you went through with the miscarriage.
Yeah, 100%. There's no doubt about that. It's not a period of my time that we look back at fondly. And obviously in all of this, and I've alluded it to with the memory box, I'd obviously lost my dad as well. So it was a significant amount of loss in a short period of time. And I didn't really ever have a baby in my arms to lose, but it was certainly the vision and the image and everything that we had ever hoped for. Yeah, it wasn't. I don't look back at that time fondly at all. I don't think I could have done this podcast even 12 months ago.
Yeah.
It absolutely takes time, but also, we spoke about it a little bit with regards to, the community around you, whether that's a wild and wild community or, friends and family, or, just sat here talking to you ladies today. I believe that was my calling, not to have children. It's, I don't sit here. I'm sat here now leading a very sort of fulfilled life. Being an auntie is like tenfold more important to me than any other role in my life. And I've got a heap of friends who've got kids, and all them like pretend aunties. So I'm
Yeah.
loads of kids. So it was a really, really sad time, no doubt about it. I do think that was my destiny, not to have children. It wasn't meant to be. I don't sit here, sort of sad now, sort of 4 or 5 years on. But at the time, it was horrific, absolutely horrific. And hopefully you've got a bit of an insight into Robbo. He did his best in this space, but it's really difficult to know who to turn to. And I think if there was more support around that I was aware of, who who'd been through that experience, who had a bit more empathy. I think that would have been really helpful at the time. But I keep going back to, it didn't need to be as bad as it was neither. I think that's what frustrates me still sat here sort of 4 or 5 years on. It didn't need to be as bad. It just didn't need to be as bad as it was.
Yeah. And I think, like, when you were just talking there, I could feel myself getting emotional, because I think it's incredibly brave for you to just sort of say that actually it's my destiny not to have children, because you've got every right to sit here and be like, this is awful. Like, why haven't I got them? I give out good things to the world. Like you said, everything was working in your favor. Like, why was it the children part that wasn't? Like, and to come through that, like you said, over the last 5 years, and to then on the other side be like, but actually I've got all the kids around me that I love. This isn't my destiny. I've lived a very fulfilled life. You're obviously still with Robbo. Like, I just think it's very brave and very inspirational to have gone through that. And I can only resonate because I have a child. So I can only imagine what that must feel like. You know what I mean? Because, and that's why I just think it's an incredible outcome that you've changed this perspective and gone, do you know what? I'm not going to channel this route anymore. This isn't meant to be. So this is what I'm going to do. And you're just going to live the rest of your life speaking out, helping others, building that community, like you said. And if there's, like I said, one person that can take that away today, what to look for symptoms, how to advocate for themselves, how to push in a work environment, how to live life and thrive without children, because there's a lot of people that don't want them, and that's also absolutely okay, because you're going to tell us now exactly what you're doing and how you've let go and how you are living your best life, right?
Yeah, and look, I genuinely believe, and look at this, and if anyone's listening, this doesn't come easy. Like, so, it does take time, and I don't, especially if anyone's going through all this recently, and they're listening to this podcast because they're going through something now, it isn't easy. And it does take, like, for an example, I'm dreading Sunday. Like, Mother's Day is just a shit show.
Yeah.
I don't, apologies about my language.
No,
It's very right.
There's some days, that are just still really, really difficult. 1st of May, clearly very, very difficult. I do believe it wasn't meant to be for me, and it absolutely puts off us, sorry. And there's a few positives in that. My relationship with Robbo came out stronger than ever, because one of my worries was, God, does he now still want to be with me? Because you can't have his children, and he's stuck around. He's and actually, I think that's a real positive. I think we came out really strong as a result of this. There are some practicalities of not having children. Our outlook on life now is very different to that of probably of a woman of my age who did have children. We certainly have a little bit more freedom and flexibility. And the reality is we wouldn't have had that if we'd got sort of a 5 or a 6-year-old running around the house right now. And then, being able to help others with my story is important to me. And then those children that are in my life feels extra more special. And let's be honest, I get all the best bits, right? I don't have to do like 2 a.m. wake up calls or World Book Day or anything like that.
Well, you can if you choose to. If you want to go Aldi and Snow White, you can just do it, can't
you? Exactly. And I do think we would have been like fantastic parents. We would have been. So we know, like, we're good at, like, when you meet some. I always remember having an auntie and an uncle who didn't have children, who weren't very like into kids, whereas we're still like quite. Well, I'd like to think we are. Maybe my niece and nephew would disagree, but I think we're like quite cool aunties and uncles as well. And we really cherish that time, and I think it's important to share that. I don't know another story like mine, and everyone's story is unique, right? But generally, people who go through IVF who really want, generally the outcome, you get there in the end. And look, we could have maybe gone down other routes, but we chose not to. And I'm really grateful for the experience, because it has, it does build your grit, it does build your resilience. Them difficult times really shape you, don't they? I believe into who we are today as a couple, and who I am as a woman in her late 40s now. So, yeah, yeah, it happened for good reason. I know that.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way that you put it, really, because I think we've known from your background you've been a successful career woman, you've been traveling, you've had pretty much a really good control of where your life and what direction it was going to. And this is something you can't control, but you just took that kind of positive spin into that kind of like career woman, right. So we have a solution for this now. What can we do? I'm in my 40s. I've still got another 40 years of my life. My life is not over. We can now do these experiences. We can do traveling. We can, bring up our friends and nieces and their kids and still have parties and then give them back when they're miserable. Do you know what I mean? There's so much more to life. There's not to dwell on the next 40 years of what you may have missed. It's like, what are we now taking advantage of and making the most of every opportunity? So when you do have that friend's child or your niece, your nephew, you're making every opportunity to maybe spoil them rotten a little bit, make those fantastic memories, which you might not have done if you had your own children,
Exactly
maybe.
that, Lucy. Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also on that note, taking the brave decision, like you said, it's taken the time, you've worked on yourself to be in this position. Had you carried on harboring, rightly so, those feelings, you might not be in the position to do all those great things. So, like you said, you've worked on yourself, you've got to this point where you're now able to move on with the next 40 years of your life, building the character that you are today, and actually you're taking away all the best bits, and flipping the perspective, and giving yourself and Robbo the greatest life. And you've had this sort of 5-year period, which it is just so courageous that you're here talking about. And now you're ready to just go on and do exactly what Lucy just said there. So honestly, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I just think we want to ask you one last thing. Based on everything you've told us and everything you've been, we're so grateful for you sharing. Who is Claire becoming now?
Oh, wow. Well, it absolutely relates to this whole journey. So, because of my outlook for my next 40 years is very different to what it may have been or could have been, I had the courage about a year ago, actually, to step out of my career that we've been alluding to.
Wow.
So, I stepped out of my full-time sort of corporate career and set up my own little business around helping and giving back to others. So I've had a career in sort of supply chain and logistics and growing retailers, and now I just want to use all my knowledge. And being here today, part of my knowledge is my miscarriage and IVF journey, so to give that knowledge back and to help others. And then my career that I was pretty successful at for 30 years, I now just want to help and give back to others as well. Any sort of pockets of knowledge I've got that can help founders that are out there at the moment. So again, it does tie in with the sort of my life sort of journey. The last year's taken a big change, and so in answer to your question, the Claire I'm becoming now has been quite a transformative year, and just giving back to others, whether that be knowledge, whether that be doing this today. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, amazing. And we'll definitely link your small business when we're putting this episode and stuff out, and we'll make sure that people know where to go to if they want to talk to you or anything that they've heard from this episode resonates with them. So yeah, send it all through to us and we'll make sure we link it for sure. And don't forget, you're working towards that house in Cornwall as well.
Yeah.
Don't forget about that.
Or you are, and I'll just come and stay and crash it all over your weekend.
Back to my hometown again. That would be great.
It's like going to Australia or something. Like, can I have my residency back?
Born here, I grew up here, but now I'm priced out the market. Gordon Ramsay, give me a house. But no, thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't. That was great. I did have a packet of tissues next to me because I thought I'd be in tears. But you've made it really easy. So thank you, ladies.
Oh no, it's our pleasure. And like I say, thank you for speaking so openly. As we said at the start of the episode, people, experience a lot of this in silence. So hopefully what we've all talked about today will make people feel less alone. And this is why we do this podcast. And like we alluded to at the end, parenthood doesn't define who you are. It doesn't define your life. And neither does loss either.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
like I say, one of the bravest things we can do is rewrite your story, which you've literally done, Claire. So I got a little bit of goosebumps when you did that. So, but yeah, so it's the year of the horse, like we mentioned at the start, and here's to trotting and I can't get my words out, galloping, going on the horses. But like I say, it's been fantastic. And on that note, I'm going to say a massive goodbye from myself.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from Claire. Thank you very much.